Jamie Hood joins Larissa in conversation tonight. Jamie is the author of Trauma Plot and How to Be a Good Girl and regards Marcel, a monthly newsletter on Proust and other miscellany. She lives here in Brooklyn. That's all from me. Please join me in giving Jamie and Larissa a very warm welcome.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Books Are Magic, for hosting me. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being my interlocutor. I'm just going to start us off with a short reading from the very beginning of the book. And we could go into this without any knowledge, but maybe it's a little bit helpful to know that our protagonist, Christine, is on the road for her debut novel, which is sort of like thinly veiled revenge fantasy about an affair she had when she was in graduate school as a painter. So she's left that life behind and she's on the road. And at some point, the protagonist or the antagonist of her novel reaches out to her. But this is before that moment. Can you hear me? Am I holding the mic properly? Okay. Sort of in the back. Okay. I think this is better. All right. The artist works. Here is her domain. Her brushes, paints, knives, and pigments. The metal surface of her work table wiped clean. Here is her canvas, bare and stretched, 4 perfect corners. The fabric is ready, the tooth eagerly raised. She glides her fingers across it, drums against the taut fabric that refuses to give. She applies the gesso with a wide, flat brush, white medium flowing over the canvas. Broad, slow strokes until the surface is filled. The canvas now shining, the canvas blank. She waits. I was running late, and by the time I got to the gate, they were asking people to check their bags because the overhead compartments were full. I was late because I love being in airports, that floating, anonymous feeling. And I had lingered too long at a cafe, thinking I had arrived early enough to sit with a coffee. I hadn't, so on the jet bridge, I turned over my suitcase and boarded the plane. After we landed, I went to the baggage claim and stood waiting for 30 minutes until I realized someone else had taken my bag. There was a black hardshell suitcase going around on the belt, but it wasn't mine, and I felt a sudden lightness, a disorientation. By this point, I was late again, so after talking to the airline, I took the elevated train to just north of the city, where I was giving a reading at a university. While I was on the train, my phone rang. The person who took your bag called, the airline representative said. He's offering to return it to you, or he can bring it to the airport and you can pick it up there. Sorry, I'm having trouble with this cord. I'm fine with meeting him, I said. I pressed a fingertip against my free ear to block out the noise of the train.
Want to try mine?
Yeah, let's try. Is it a little hot? Might have to go behind your chair.
All right. This
Suspenseful.
is the sexy part.
Oh, thank you. All right. Where were we? I'm fine with meeting him, I said. I pressed a fingertip against my free ear to block out the noise of the train. I gave the representative permission to share my phone number and stepped onto the exposed platform. A hard wind was blowing over the water. When I turned to look at the shore, a few blocks in the distance, I knew it was a lake, but it extended so far into the horizon it seemed like the ocean. Because it was fresh water, the tides were smaller, I assumed, and posed less of a danger to construction, and so the city was built right up to its edge. That seemed wrong to me. The city felt perched on the lip of nothingness, a settlement on the bank of infinity. The reading was in a handsome Gothic building set on the quad. It was the first stop on my book tour. I use tour euphemistically, usually when talking to strangers or acquaintances about my trip. I had written a novel, my first, and it had been published by a small press in the spring. Shortly before the book was to come out, my relationship of 5 years ended. Then I had wanted nothing more than to leave my own life. By cobbling together speaking fees from universities and relying on the goodwill of friends here and there for a place to stay, I was able to plan a loose itinerary, moving in stops across the country. I had never traveled through America like this. After my ex moved out, I busied myself with booking events and finding a subletter for the time I would be away from our apartment, which was now solely my apartment, and which I could not afford on my own. This was an issue I knew that would become only more pressing with time, but with the month's rent secured and a subletter installed, I packed my suitcase and departed. The reading went well. I read from a scene early in the book, the one I had decided I would read at all my events, a scene where the artist is in her studio waiting for something or someone to arrive. Then I gave a short talk. After, there was a question and answer session with the professor who had invited me to campus, and then the discussion opened up to the students. Though I was still relatively new to the business of being a working writer, I liked speaking at schools. The Q&A always seemed more lively with higher stakes. I liked seeing the serious faces of the students as I listened, and I liked the way they asked questions that were nearly exclusively occupied with the structures of their own lives. There was something sweet about their solipsism to witness how visibly they were constructing their convictions, which after this interval might remain in place for years. Near the end of the event, a student in the front row raised her hand and waited for the mic to come her way. When you write, do you have a plan? She asked. Or do you see it as an act of faith? I wasn't sure how to answer. I usually start with a plan, I said, a scenario I want to explore, some kind of relationship or tension I'm interested in, something that provokes the initial impulse. But once I begin writing, things start to change. She nodded, waiting for me. So I suppose you could say from that point on, it's an act of faith, I said. I do have to have faith in the characters to tell me what to do, and I have to have faith in my own ability to tell a story, but it's possible I have a different idea of faith than you do. I see, she said. Maybe it's not so different. In a way, you're trusting that the story inside you will come out in the way that it's intended, right? Well, I said, sometimes I feel more like a conduit for it. At a point, it starts to take over, and I have to listen. A beautiful expression moved across her face. I've felt that way before, she said. Sometimes I feel the story in my body. It begins somewhere in my heart and moves all the way down to my hands. She held one out now and flexed it, her painted nails flashing in the low light of the auditorium. And it builds, and once, she said, gripping the mic with both hands now, once I was at work and a story came to me nearly in its entirety. And I couldn't write it down. I had to let it build, this tremendous pressure ratcheting up and up and up until my shift ended. And on the train home, I typed it all on my phone, my fingers flying, not looking up until it was finished. She fell silent, waiting for me to respond. Someone in the audience shifted, as if to release the pressure she had invoked. A restlessness moved through the crowd. In the front row, I saw a woman shake out her hands and reach into her bag. But it doesn't happen all the time, the student said. When that doesn't happen, how do you know when something is worth working on? I remembered being her age, earnest to a fault, so certain of art's power and possibility. I, too, had once believed I had special talent, that there existed something only I could make, and that I deserved to make it. Student's face shone with a lovely, milky opacity. I wanted her to keep believing this, that she was capable of great things, but I couldn't think of anything to say in the moment that wouldn't sound bald and false. You don't, I said. You don't know whether something is worth continuing, not until you've started it, and sometimes even then you don't know. But you have to keep working at it, I said. I was using a microphone too, one clipped to the collar of my shirt. My voice sounded tinny and unfamiliar, lagging slightly through the auditorium speakers, and for a moment I wasn't sure if it was actually me speaking. It seemed like the voice of someone else. When you were writing this book, the student said, how did you know? I didn't, I said, but I had to write it. How many times had I thought this, said it to myself and others? I had to write it. There was no alternative, no world in which I hadn't. After the event, there was a short reception, and by the time things were winding down, it was around 3 in the afternoon. I had been awake since the very early morning. The university had booked me a room in a hotel downtown, though perhaps it was too much effort for one day. I'd intended to visit a museum too. But there was still the matter of my missing suitcase, and I lingered at the entrance to the university building, considering what to do next. In an alcove, there was an array of flyers and postcards, advertisements for talks and cultural events. I sat on a bench and flipped through a stack of flyers, phone in hand. A well-known poet was giving a talk in 2 weeks. Looking at the dates, I had just missed the Omni show at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. Then I saw on one postcard a painting I knew, or rather, I knew the painter. My phone rang and I answered it. With my free hand, I turned the postcard over so the image was no longer visible. "Hi," said a man's voice. "Is this Christine?" "Yes," I said. "Hi, I have your bag." "Oh, good." "I'm so sorry," he said. He sounded embarrassed, young. "This has never happened to me before. I don't know where you are, but I could meet you in the Loop. That's convenient for you, downtown, I mean." "Don't worry about it," I said. "That's fine for me. I was actually planning to stop by the Art Institute, so maybe you can meet me there." "On it," he said, his voice swelling with relief. "I'm going so fast. I'm already there. I've got your bag. I'm waiting for you. I'm sitting on the steps. Man, it's nice out today." I laughed in spite of myself. "It's okay," I said. I turned the postcard back, looked at the painting. Abstract, slashes of violet bleeding over dull gray, a smear of acid green. Then I set it down again. "Really," I said. "I'll be there in an hour." I'll just read one last little part. So she goes to get her suitcase. She meets this guy. His name was Henry. I left my suitcase at the coat check and we decided to see the contemporary exhibit on view. As we walked up the marble staircase of the museum, he asked about my novel. "So it's a book about art?" I had told him that I had just given a talk about writing inspired by visual art and archives, but that didn't really summarize what the book was about or why I had written it. "It's more like a book about an artist," I said. I thought about what to say next. "Who becomes entangled in an affair with an older painter," I said. "Oh," he said, "which ends badly." "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry," I said. "It's fiction." He nodded. "You could call it a revenge fantasy, actually." He nodded again, looking uncertain. "I'm not an artist," I said.
Thank you, Larissa. Let me see if this is going to work. Okay. Is my volume okay back there? Great. Congratulations. Can we get one more round of applause for Larissa, please? Also, we have about 6 seats up here. If anyone wants to sit down, we really are not going to hurt you. Probably.
We're so nice.
We're really nice.
There's 6 great seats.
They're like the most beautiful seats I've ever seen. Thank you, volunteers. Okay. Well, I think one of the first things I want to ask is it weird to read a scene about doing a book event on the first book event of your book tour for this novel? It's a very Russian nesting doll.
Yes, it is, because I've read from this book once before, in its like published form, and at that reading there was a lot of lag on the mic. And when Christine gets to the point where she's talking about the lag, I was like, life, art. And here it was the clipped mic. I was like, oh my goodness gracious. Yeah, but I think that's, it's kind of by design, but it does still feel kind of strange.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to? I've never done this with fiction before, where I've been interviewing someone about a novel. Do you want to? Is there anything that you want to anchor people in? Because I assume, how many people have read Discipline already? Actually, kind of a lot. That's great. Do you want to do like the elevator pitch for those of us in the audience who have not?
Sure, yes. So I alluded to this in the beginning, but just in case you're walking in now. So Christine, our protagonist, is on tour for this novel. and it is about this affair that she's had. It's or a relationship, and she's revenge fantasy. It's quite pulpy. And so the very beginning section that I read actually is like a mini excerpt from Christine's novel. So there are these kind of bolded sections. I would like to show you what they look like. These bolded sections in the beginning. So these are excerpts from Christine's novel itself. So Christine is having a dandy time on the road, and then she gets a message from the real life person who inspired her book, being like, "That's not how I remember it." And then things proceed from there.
Right. Yeah, the book is split into two parts. And I want to get into the structure in a minute, but I guess one of the things I like to start with is just sort of trying to get a sense of what the origin of the book was. So, like, when did you start writing this? How is this your first foray into fiction? What was it like? Because your last book was essays, pop song. Um, Actually, that was a fantastic launch party. I think it was the first time I was like a real bad girl after the pandemic happened. I remember this very clearly. But yeah, so what was it like shifting from an essay collection into a novel? I might just talk like this.
Yes, it's interesting because what is not visible between these books is a graduate thesis that I wrote, like maybe 120 pages of. That's all close third, moving between women in a family. And so writing in close third was really rewarding, but also really, really difficult. And by the end of my MFA, I was like, I can't write in third person anymore. I need to return to first person. It's my home. And so Christine's narrative voice kind of arose out of that desire to really explore and have fun with first person, and that's kind of how we kind of arrived at discipline. And then I think the core triangle between maybe Christine and the old painter, as he's called, her mentor, and the novel came from this interest in, what happens when we write about other people, right? Like what's the hazard of it? Just felt like really fraught territory that I wanted to explore.
Yeah. How long did it take you?
I started writing this seriously in the fall of starting in June of 2022. I have maybe like one chapter written like leading up to that. And that last term of my MFA, pounded out 4 more chapters. And then I finished the manuscript, I think, in, I want to say, spring of 24. So, and the publication process was quite fast. I think it was like a very short and quick edit, multiple rounds.
What draws you to fiction? Over dinner, we had dinner together, and you were talking about how one of the things that's sort of thrilling about it is getting to lie.
Yes. Yes, at dinner I was like, I love lying. Um, I think and Jamie, you're an essayist too, so I think you understand like there is this like when you're writing nonfiction, there's always this one of the strengths of nonfiction is that you're like, well, it happened. So we care because it happened to someone in the world. Whereas in fiction, you have to convince someone of the importance of something that didn't happen, and you're kind of creating it at whole cloth. And I was really interested in the freedom that fiction provides, and feels almost like a cheat code where you can like put your very real emotions into a text and then be like, but none of this actually happened, so I'm safe.
Sorry, I'm hoping that this mic is going to work for more. But so the novel's broken into two parts, and I'm thinking a lot about the first section, or the sort of first big chunk, is broken into 5 parts, each of which is organized around a painter. And we can talk about what drew you to those painters. I'm very interested in like your sort of relationship with painting. I'm also interested in the way, and this is sort of, I guess it's not a spoiler, but it is going to indicate sort of the structure of the novel a little bit more, which is that the first 5 sections feel very much like you're entering the tradition of the novel in conversations, if that makes sense. And so like, and a wonderful entry into this, and what it honestly reminded me quite a bit of was the Outline trilogy, the Rachel Cusk Outline trilogy, and thinking about women artists navigating the world vis-a-vis like the art making principle, and how they talk about art making with others, and how that sort of insinuates them in situations with other people. And so I don't know if if that feels like an influence for you, or if you want to
Mhm.
talk about that, or what it feels like to write a novel in conversations in part, and we can come to the second part later.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. Cusk is an obvious influence on me. Love her. We're having a mic switch. So I'll vamp for a bit. Yeah, I really respect the Outline trilogy. And I think what Cusk is doing there is, allowing you access into these minds of other characters. And I think, Faye, her narrator, is maybe a bit more judgmental or even cruel than Christine might be. And I think I was interested in, and another influence on this book also is Isaac Gilshwaz's White on White, which also is like takes place in a conversational mode. And I think I was interested in how the conversation allows you to write in third person and first person at the same time. That was just like really delightful for me. I think the main thing with this project is I just wanted to have fun. I was just like, what can we do here? Like, let's do some donuts. Like, let's go figure skating. Like, I was just feeling so constrained by third person that like the moment I started writing in first person, I was like, let's do tricks. So yes, Cusk is an influence in the conversational mode, but I knew that a reader going into this book would kind of, identify that that was what I was doing, and so it felt important to also break that somehow, which I think takes us to the second half of your question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the second half of the novel, you mean?
Yes, and also maybe just like that conflict between Christine and the old painter is like, to me, that kind of, I wanted to like surprise the reader with that, like, oh, by the way, there's this thing that she has to work through.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, you also shift tenses in the
Yes.
second half of the book. You go from the past to the present. And so like the formal constraint of the novel feels very shifted in the second part, and the immediacy of the second part when she is encountering the old painter again. Which, yeah, I mean, we discussed this as well, which is like we don't want to spoil things that happen at the end. So I feel like sort of constrained myself, but
Yes, yes.
that immediacy felt sort of shocking, like when you shift gears.
Yes. Yeah, so the first part of the book is all in past tense. So, we have this like unspecified point of telling, and then in the second half, which I don't think is a spoiler, is that Christine does go to meet up with this antagonist and work something out or not work something out. But yes, that second half is in present tense, and I started out writing it in past tense, and then I was like, this isn't working because I don't know where she's telling it from. There's a lot of my students in class, in this room right now. And you know that I love talking about point of telling, and this is exactly why, because if you don't know where your narrator is at the end of the book, like it's very hard to figure out what the point of telling should be. And so writing the second half in present tense kind of allowed for me to discover alongside with Christine, like where she was going. And then it also created a wonderful sense of suspense. And I was kind of trying to write a thriller, so.
It is a thriller.
Yes,
And
this
it
is a
ends in a
thriller.
yeah, it's totally
It's
a
very
thriller.
thrilling. It's full of suspense, twists and turns.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to stick for a little bit on the sort of way that you talk about art. And I think it's like, it's interesting to me too. And I'm not trying to like harp on the Cusk thing, but like you do something, I think, a little more complex here than usually writers tend to do, which is like writers either are like, I'm going to write about a writer, or they like do the other thing where they're like, I'm going to turn my person, like my character, my autofictional character, my non-autofictional character into like a different kind of artist. And you, I think, do something stranger because you have a character who is both a writer and a painter and is encountering both of these forms and thinking about the sort of complexity of that dynamic when you leave a form because you have to leave it and turn to a new form in order to figure out some sort of different conflict in your life. And I don't know, you actually, maybe we could just talk a little bit about painting and talk about the painters that you chose because I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so Christine was a painter and she has left that path kind of due to what elapsed between her and her mentor. And yeah, I was really interested in writing about this kind of failure, I guess, or this kind of like relinquishing. And I myself have been a painter in my life. And I don't do that anymore for different reasons than Christine, but some of them overlap. Like painting is quite expensive, for example. Like you need a lot of space, you need a lot of room, you need a lot of materials. Writing, you don't really need anything except for a thing to write on. Um, but I have a real love and admiration for painting, and so I really enjoy writing about visual art. Um, and so each chapter in the first half of the book, the first couple of chapters, are kind of structured around these encounters with visual artists. And each chapter is titled after an artist, so you really know that that's the point. And so Via Selmans is the first artist that is brought up. I'm so sorry. I keep looking over at the manga section and I see this drawing of Gojo, and I just like, I just have to bring that into the room. I'm so sorry. Um, Via Selman's wonderful artist. Uh,
Not as good as that artist.
I know. Jujutsu Kaisen also really wonderful work of art. Um, so I was interested in so I think I found out that the Art Institute of Chicago had some Selman's pieces, and I was like, okay, great, I'm gonna have them looking at a Selman's, and I like writing characters looking at art because they can talk about it, and the art becomes it's kind of like action in that like it's like or scene, right? It's something they respond to, but also the art is bringing in all these associations, all this like really strong psychic energy through which you can talk about themes. And so Selman's is really exciting to me because her work to me is about this attempt to represent reality, this attempt to represent, you know, memory, the texture of memory, printed matter, photographs. Um, and so all of this was kind of like swirling around as I was like embarking on writing this first chapter. And it seemed like a really nice analog to the theme of the chapter, which is about genre and realism. I'm sorry if this sounds alienating if you haven't read the book. I promise like things are kind of coming together. Um, but you know, Christine and this guy Henry, they have this conversation about like, you know, what kind of art do you like? Like, do you like it when things look real, or do you like it when things look like abstract, when they look like they could only come out of someone's mind? And I think a question of this book is like, what are we trying to do when we make art that looks like life? And like Christine has made a piece of art that resembles her life, but is so exaggerated that it isn't necessarily true. So I think to really roll it back to your original question, yeah, bringing in these visual artists was a way to kind of, I think, just really just draw on their really strong energy, and to get to write about that in a very free way, and to get to have the characters responding to it.
Mhm. What do you think? I mean, you said you don't paint anymore, but maybe this can be a question for you or a question for how you imagine Christine might think through it. But like, what is the difference between what visual art offers us and writing? I mean, that's such a, I'm not a visual artist. So it's just like so foreign to me. And I'm thinking about like, what do we do when we turn to writing? Like Christine, for example, says that a story, if it is good, essentially has to take you to some other place, to somewhere else. And so I was thinking a lot about what the somewhere else in this novel is, and also what the somewhere else, if you look at a painting, what is the transportive moment? And yeah, like so many scenes, like several scenes in the first half of the book take place um, between people looking at art and thinking through that. But I'm curious, just maybe what you would say the visual register offers.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, I think something that is so exciting about visual art is that it doesn't really involve words. Truly. And sometimes it's not representational, right? It's not figural. It's like abstract, like it's just washes of color. Another artist in this book is Helen Frankenthaler, who just had a really great show at MoMA that I saw with Jennifer, who's in the second row here. And you know, those abstract paintings, like you look at it and there's just like a mood. It's not really something that's expressed in language. And I think that's what's very exciting to me about visual art is that it is its own language, and you encounter it in a different way. I think when I was in college, I remember everyone being really down on like linear narrative, and I think there is like maybe like a strain of like linear narrative hate in contemporary culture. But when you read a book, right, like you start at the first page and you keep reading, and then the author, the only thing you can control is the order in which people are reading things, and the sentences that you write. So it's very constraining in that way. Whereas in a painting, you're like looking around all at once. Um, and so I think that to me is like the difference is like the way your time is managed in front of something. Um, do I have anything else to say? No, I would like to hear your next question.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess one of the things that I have not addressed at all, but I think, and is also sort of maybe not explicitly reckoned with in the book as as maybe someone else might have explicitly reckoned with it, but like this is to me is clearly a Me Too novel,
Yes, yes.
and and it feels very um, one of the interesting things is how ambivalent it is about being a Me Too novel and how
Mm,
ambivalent Christine is about having had this affair with a professor. So the affair with the professor turns her away from painting, like it sort of
mhm,
destroys her relationship with visual art, and um, and then she writes the revenge novel, right?
mhm, mhm,
But like you never use the word Me Too, but
mhm,
Christine
mhm,
says something about the time that we're living in. I could look up the exact passage, but it's
mhm,
something
mhm.
about how these other women's stories made it possible that she could tell her own.
Yes, yes.
And so I'm curious about like how you are thinking through that ideology, like ideological scaffolding, like how you're sort of positioning her relationship into it politically. There's so much like fascination here about like her relationship to gender as well, that's
Mhm,
partly about abuses and partly about other things, partly about
mhm,
desire and objectification.
mhm, mhm.
um, and it sort of comes at the same moment that she's recognizing that as she's writing she's being positioned as a woman writer, which is
Yeah.
very different than being positioned as a writer, right?
Yes, yes.
So I don't know if you want to speak to any of the sort of gender politics there.
I feel like you opened up like this really incredible field that it's really nice to spend time in. I don't know if I have like a like one answer for all these really interesting questions you've raised, but yes, like Christine does refer to this moment in time. This book is set about in like 2022-ish, I would say. Um, which almost makes it historical, I guess. And so she is alluding to how this upswelling of women's and non-binary people's narratives during the era which we refer to as Me Too, kind of allowed for her to like it kind of created space for her to kind of write down her story. And yeah, I was interested in writing a book that um, kind of dealt with this question, I guess almost at a remove or like at a slant, right? Like it didn't seem necessary to write Christine's novel. Like I actually wasn't interested in writing like the revenge novel that is contained within this text, but I was interested in seeing what happened after, right? Like what is her reception? What does it mean that like, it's funny, I think the New York Times refers to like Christine's book as like sorry, this is so meta. Not in the book, but like in real life, they refer to her book as like a career maker, which is not something that I included in the text, but it's interesting that like that's one interpretation, right? Like that was Christine's big break,
Mhm.
was to like write this kind of narrative, but it also meant being positioned in a certain way. And I think something that Christine is really chafing against in this book is like being seen only as this like, young woman who's like pretty and like, sexy or whatever. And she has this real kind of skepticism of being perceived that way, and yet she can't really find a way out of it. She's and so she's kind of there's like an angst about it.
Mhm.
Um, and so has that answered your question? I feel like I've gone down a little bit of a road.
No, it's great. I guess I also you are answering my question. I think I was just sort of animated by how do I put this? I actually felt sort of surprised by her allusion to Me Too because she's so insistent
Mm,
that she was consenting to the affair, which is
Mhm.
like I think that is sort of a slant approach to this, you know, where like
Mm.
it seems very obvious that what happened was an abuse of power,
Mhm.
and yet,
Mhm.
you know, we rarely hear stories from people who are sort of more interested in the complexity or the strangeness or the ambivalent
Mm.
positioning in
Mhm.
relation to, you know, remaining like maintaining some sense of agency even in a situation where you have been ostensibly violated, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I thought
Mhm.
that was like a very fascinating character decision on her part.
Mhm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think I've read from this book before, and people are like, "Oh, well, she was definitely like, assaulted or something." And I'm like, "Well, you can interpret it that way. I don't have it really going a hard way in the text. Like, I think I would hope that a reader can kind of maybe imagine what they will.
Mhm.
But I think I was interested in that sort of gray space for Christine, because that also, I think, made space for them to speak to each other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have time for one more question. And
Okay.
I don't know. Okay, sorry. One more thing about the cusk thing that I thought was like you were doing sort of
Yes.
in a very like fascinating way for me
Uh-huh.
was, and this connects to what we were just talking about in terms of like what it means to be like a woman artist, you know.
Right, right.
And I think like if you're a woman and you're a writer, you always have to think about like what it means to sort of see that interfacing like your artistry with like other sort of conventional female roles, right? And
Right.
so like Christine is not a wife or a mother, but it does feel as if art in the novel is sort of corrosive to like domestic familial relations
Mm.
in some important way, which like
Hmm.
yeah, I don't know, I mean, like I was thinking a lot about that. My book was not a novel, but like I thought a lot about the way that my book sort of, and Christine talks about this with her ex, where like the book sort of becomes the monolith at the center of the relationship that
Mm.
undoes the relationship. And so I was
Mhm.
just sort of like immediately like tuned in, and I don't know, I'm curious if you have thoughts about juggling those things and how Christine juggles them.
Yes. I mean, I feel like this brings up this great question, which is like, is the patriarchy like not compatible with like women making art? Like, like, yes, but but actually, like, it does the patriarchy, or like, does a certain kind of like male fear or like weakness, or um does that not allow for the capaciousness of like the woman artist genius?
Right.
Right, like just being like, I didn't think you could do that, or like I didn't think that you would like work so hard on this, or like I didn't. Yes, I feel like that is um that's definitely in here, and I think there are kind of like two villains in this book, right? Like there's the old painter, and then there's Christine's ex, who's kind of like, you just went into. I don't think this is a spoiler, but there's this character who the relationship ends partly because Christine has kind of gone into this tunnel writing this novel, and she emerges and she's like, look at this thing I made, and her ex reads it and is like, that happened to you? Like, that's crazy, you didn't tell me about this. And it's it's not really he's not really like seeing like what she's trying to make. So maybe a theme of this book is like women trying to make art and men getting in the way.
Totally.
I think that could be
Totally.
a good note to end
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, men stop getting in the fucking way.
Yeah, get out of the
Get out of the
way.
way.
Get out of the way.
All right. Well, please give another round of applause to Larissa.
Thank you. That's fun.
And I think we have time for some audience questions. I hope you've been mulling them over. Karen?
Going back to something you said at the beginning about the move from nonfiction to fiction, and how it was just like, oh, fab, I can just write like with this like freedom of lying, um, in order to imbue some like emotional truth, and et cetera, et cetera. I was wondering what about writing this book may have pointed you towards as to your next book, like anything in this process that kind of oriented you towards whatever's coming next.
Ooh, okay. So for the live stream, Heron has asked what writing what in this book has maybe pointed me towards something in the next book, roughly. Am I capturing the essence? Okay. I guess I should have done that into the big mic too. This is gonna sound kind of silly, but it's made me want to try out other things formally. I had a lot of fun writing in present tense. I was like, this is kind of cool. So I want to try writing in third person present tense, and I want to try writing more set pieces with like multiple characters kind of crisscrossing because I think the bulk of this book is really just and actually maybe the entirety of it is just conversations between two people. I think I only have two people in a room at once. So I'm like, what if there were three? And it was in third person. That sounds pretty wild.
I feel like there's always various levels of like self-consciousness or self-censor when writers write about writers. How did you think about that or surmount that?
Okay, levels of self consciousness about writers writing about writers. And how did I go around that? Or did I? I think I honestly didn't think about that, I guess. I think I was more worried about whether I was fetishizing painting as this like perfect art form because I love painting so much and I don't do it. But I think Christine being a writer is so fundamental to this book that I think I was just like, I just have to go with her and ask the questions that she's asking. But I don't think I will write another book. Maybe that's something else that I got out of this book is I don't think the next book is going to be about a writer. Yes.
I imagine that with your essays and also with first person in fiction, there's an interplay of like self knowledge and like self opacity in writing from that perspective. So I'm curious how that differed between like writing personal essays and writing fiction.
Okay, interplay between self knowledge and self opacity in writing essays versus fiction. Okay, great question. I think, well, I'll start with fiction. I think Christine is very opaque to herself in this book. I think there's a lot of things that I think of her as a very repressed character. And so there are times where she's acting without thinking, or she's kind of moving from like a place that she maybe doesn't fully understand. And I think that's a very interesting aspect of her character. Whereas I think in essay and if you have a strong thought about this, feel free to chime in. I think the knowledge of the self opacity is a little bit more shadowy almost to me because usually when I'm writing an essay, I'm trying to figure out what it is that I think. And so the movement of the essay is like navigating that sort of sinuous path to self knowledge. So maybe it starts from a place of opacity and then we end up in a place of maybe slightly more clarity.
Yeah. I mean, I think the only thing I would add to that is like, it seems to me it's quite obvious when you read someone's nonfiction work that's about themselves when like they're actually still avoiding the problem.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
yes.
It's like you still aren't actually looking, you're like still opaque to yourself. It feels very, very clear. But yeah, I don't know. I like how you do it in fiction. I like how you do it in the novel. I think there's something very fascinating about like the withholding, you know, which is so like integral to fiction, I think, where like a sort of non-fictional personal approach, you're maybe like sort of moving things around, but like the idea is ultimately that you're supposed to sort of reveal something, I think. And I think there's so much about discipline that's about concealment.
Hi. So I think my question is about like the relationship between writing and art because it seems like this book sees them as like separate, but also in the real world too. You know, there's a pipeline between like writing and painting and writing, and obviously like art writing exists. But it also seems like fiction is like a good place to explore also the ways in which like painting and writing touch each other. And so I'm just like wondering your thoughts on that.
Okay, exploring the places where painting and writing touch each other in fiction specifically. Yeah, I think this is a very good question because it's kind of like a sideways question. No. We're good. Let me think. I think in this book. So okay, I'm gonna go at this from like maybe a slant answer, but in my essay collection, I don't use a lot of transitions. There's like a lot of stating a fact or describing a scene and then moving into something else, moving into biography or moving into another observation. And I was talking to someone about that, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of all bone. There's no connective tissue. And in fiction, I think it's all connective tissue because like the thing that you're trying to say is wrapped up in the body of the story or the novel, which is itself like this fleshy thing. And like you can't really puncture it because there's so many little moving parts that keep it alive. It's like the spirit of it is like it's in its body. And so I think I guess maybe it's just like a different way of looking at the relationship between those things. Like I think you can't necessarily get at it from an analytical way that you would in a piece of arts writing or criticism. It becomes this more like holistic, like mystical kind of transformative experience. You're smiling, so I feel like I'm going down the right path with that.
Yeah, you're great. You're great. It's just fun to listen to you. Sorry.
The novel is a body, you guys. The essay is a skeleton, but the novel is a body.
I think we have time for 2 more.
What are some of your favorite revenge fantasy pieces of art? Like films, novels, essays, paintings?
Oh no. Okay. favorite revenge fantasy pieces. Gosh, I don't know if I actually am an avid consumer of the revenge fantasy.
I feel like I definitely am versed in like the rape revenge movie genre. Yeah, I don't know. There was actually, the woman who did The Substance, which I thought was kind of a terrible film, did like a really kind of also bad movie called Revenge, which was in French, and it's about a woman who gets vengeance on her rapists. And it's like it is kind of bad, but it's like bad in a fascinating way. It's like very campy, and it's like a very strange approach to like sexual violence. It's incredibly gory and it's fun. I mean, I don't know. I guess it's also like Last House on the Left, things like that. I don't know. I'm trying to think.
This is another slant answer, but I love Decision to Leave. I think that's a really fantastic film, and it's kind of a revenge fantasy, except where she does she does the murders.
Oh, I thought of one.
Yes.
Double Jeopardy.
I haven't seen that.
The Ashley Judd movie. Oh my god. There was like the like 90s erotic thriller, or sort of like or like Enough with J-Lo. It's like whenever there was like a domestic violence narrative in the 90s, it would have like a really heavy hitting like star at the center, and she would go after her abuser. Like in Double Jeopardy, Ashley Judd is framed for her husband's murder, and then she like chases him down after like an incredible montage of getting like really jacked, So that would be maybe where I would go.
Okay. I need to consume this content immediately.
You have to watch Double Jeopardy. Yeah. Okay. So one more. Sorry, I'm like ranting now.
No. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Do we have one more? Yes.
I'm kidding.
Please.
Grad school, you had described the book that you mentioned writing formerly, your third person book, as your wife, and this book as your mistress. So I'm wondering, besides like fun and freeing, I'm wondering when you knew that like your mistress like had enough legs to pursue all the way, and like how you decided to make her.
So for the live stream, Lucy, my colleague from Bennington, has revealed some of our lore, which is that, yes, my thesis project was I referred to her as my wife. And this project was my mistress in that I had a lot more of my thesis written, this third person multi-generational novel. And the question is, how did I know that this book had legs, or that my mistress had legs, and that I needed to wife her up? This is a really misogynistic metaphor. You should love all women in your life. I'm sorry, I'm getting weird at the end of the night. I think maybe a better way to describe it is that this third person multi-generational novel was something that I felt really moved to write, and I felt like I really had to write it. And I felt very called to write it. And at the same time, I don't think actually my skill level was high enough to pull it off. Like I didn't know anything about plotting really when I started grad school, and it's not that discipline was like easy to write or easy to plot. But I think I just had so much fun writing it, and I was able to see a way forward with it, and that kind of pushed me to try to finish it. And then I married it, and now we're here. But yeah, I think writing towards a place of pleasure feels really productive. And writing towards one's nature, right? Like trying to do things that you're good at is nice. I think because I don't know, in life there's a lot of things that are hard that we have to do. So doing writing that you're good at seems nice.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you so much again,
Thank
Larissa.
you.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for coming out tonight and bearing with us through some funky technical things tonight. But we really appreciate you being here. Thank you to Jamie for moderating such a fantastic conversation. And thank you to Larissa for celebrating this incredible launch with us. So, some final reminders before we all wrap up and head home. If you already got a copy of the book, that's fantastic. Good for you. If you didn't, we've got some additional copies available for purchase at the register where you checked in. I believe we have about 10 additional copies, so don't run, but move with urgency. So we'll be around to sign and personalize your books. That's going to be happening right where my coworker is going to be pointing. Yeah, right over there. Because there are so many of you here tonight. Thank you, by the way. I'm going to ask that you please hold your hugs and your hellos and your congrats until you get to Larissa in the signing line, just so we can get her set up back there and get this evening moving. Once we have her set up, please make sure you grab all of your personal belongings with you so our staff can start to break down all these chairs and rearrange the store. And that's all. Let's give these two one last round of applause. Thank you all so much. Have a great night.